The civil society movement Defend Our Democracy says corruption is an evil practice and it must be rooted out in all government spheres. The movement met in Tembisa East of Johannesburg today to launch Anti-Corruption Week. SABC News reporter Calvin Dludla was there and he spoke with Nicole Fritz from the movement.
We are outside Tembisa Provincial Hospital, of course, here in Tembisa. The movement Defend Our Democracy is launching Anti-Corruption Week. Let me introduce Nicole Fritz from the DOD, who will actually explain to us about the purpose of this event and what they are trying to achieve. Nicole, thank you very much for your time. We saw people singing here, having placards. What is this Anti-Corruption Week about?
So, this is the media launch of the Anti-Corruption Week, which actually takes place at the beginning of December. But we've gathered outside Tembisa Hospital, both to draw attention to the fact that Tembisa Hospital was the site of huge amounts of procurement illegality. So tenders for resources, for medication, for goods that were needed and were designed to go to the poorest and the most vulnerable, those who are sick and infirm. In fact, those tenders were utilized instead of being received for the sick, were used in order to enrich various political actors. And so we're trying to draw attention to that, but also, of course, draw attention to the fact that Babita Diakaran, who drew attention to the fact that these tenders, she was a Gauteng health official, drawing attention to the fact that there were these irregular, illegal tenders. She, in fact, was assassinated for her disclosure. And thus far, whilst the people who are alleged to have pulled the trigger have been arrested, there has been no accountability for those who ordered her hit. And it speaks to the vulnerability of those public servants. So, in fact, it's trying to draw attention to two things: to the fact that corruption is hurting the poor, but also that those among us who are brave, who are doing their jobs, are actually in danger for doing their jobs, and we are calling for accountability.
That's what I was about to ask. Is this only focused on the health sector, or it's a blanket strike?
No, the Anti-Corruption Week is intended to spotlight the fact that we are seeing corruption in wide spheres of government. Often it's kind of cost-intensive procurement of resources intended to service the poor who cannot go out and utilize the private sector in order to assist them. So it's education, it's healthcare, it's housing, those sectors. But it's also in other sectors, in our state-owned enterprises, where we see horrific corruption. But it means that the poorest of the poor are the most vulnerable when the money is not available, when the state can't provide those services because the money has been taken in order to enrich people, when it's been stolen. It is the poorest in our communities who are most badly hurt because they can't afford the private sector, as I said. Whereas if you're rich, to some extent you can just go and purchase those goods. You're not reliant on the state. And so the lesson here and what we're looking to draw attention to with Corruption Week is that corruption is not a victimless crime. In fact, it is the weakest and the most vulnerable who are hurt by corruption.
What would you want to see happening after this?
Well, I mean, the idea behind this week is both to draw attention to the fact that there cannot be corruption in government, right? That we as a society must be clear that this is a crime that has a horrific impact on the weakest and the vulnerable in our society. But also we know we've had a Zondo Commission led by our former Chief Justice, the Commission into State Capture, which named a number of individuals, persons who need to be investigated. They need to, if those investigations bear out the suspicions that they are responsible for high-level kind of corruption, they must be brought to account. And that accountability, I think, is what we are calling for, what we haven't seen. And this culture of impunity, where people can commit these horrific crimes, where the weakest and the most vulnerable are made victims, where they cannot go into a hospital and be able to expect to receive service quickly that might save their lives, that might ease their discomfort, where the person's responsible for them not being able to do so get to live high and mighty, drive fancy cars, and they know that they are immune. They will not face any accountability. They will not face the law. That is a recipe for a really disastrous situation for our country, and that's what we're trying to draw attention to.